Yeah. So the key to having everybody thinking differently and behaving differently is that they have something that they are all rowing in the same direction to
Right.
achieve. So that common purpose, that common language that they can use is really important. So I think that for most teams, when I'm looking at innovation in a company, we're looking at how do you really get clear on what is the customer experience and what are you there to serve? So what value do you provide? And so they did a lot of research on what motivates people. And it was surprising research because it showed that the most motivating thing for employees is that they could make progress on a meaningful goal. And
Mm.
progress would be that they have autonomy and the ability to get traction without being micromanaged, with being hindered by other factors in an organization or just, on their team. But the meaningful goal part was that they could see that their efforts were moving them towards something of value.
You are listening to the Beyond the Scoreboard podcast, transforming athletes into leaders on and off the court with host Coach Furtado. Coaches, are you ready to take your passion for coaching and turn it into a full-time career? I know the challenges firsthand, but the Make Money Coaching Sports program helped me take BTG basketball full-time. If you're tired of juggling coaching part-time and want to fully focus on doing what you love, this business accelerator will give you the tools and support to make it happen. Hit the link in the show notes below to learn more and start living your dream. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Beyond the Scoreboard podcast. Our guest today is Laurie Clarke. Laurie is a transformative leader who's making change at Walmart, Wells Fargo, and her biggest balancing act is being a single mom to a nationally competing volleyball athlete. Laurie's expertise in corporate strategy and team dynamics translate seamlessly to the demands of the parenting world of competitive sports. Get ready to hear how she juggles boardrooms, tournaments, and leadership, plus late night practices. Laurie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited to have our conversation on leadership and communication. And for those that were listening beforehand, Laurie and I were talking. She's like, I really don't know a ton about sports. But then she just dropped a ton of wisdom on communication and team building. And that's what this podcast is all about. So let's dive in right there. Talking about your kind of career in terms of, corporate boardrooms and executive teams, can you kind of fill the people in on what you do on a daily basis?
Yeah, so I work as an executive coach, but I also work with companies who want to innovate and design new ways of operating, either for their customers or for their employee experience. So I work with a lot of critical thinking development, design theories, and help them transform their organizations while building that capability for themselves. So developing their own leadership styles and their own team dynamics.
Absolutely. And so when we're building and starting a team, where does like the coach or the boss, the supervisor even begin?
It's a good question. So I think that there has been a lot of talk about diversity these days. And I think the part to think about is similar to a sports team. You need people who bring different talents and skills and styles to the team. So if you have a team that's all very similar to you, if you're not having different ways of approaching problems or thinking things through, if you're not having, I'm going to say, constructive disagreement, then you probably don't have the right mix of people to make the best high performing team. So it sounds like I'm saying find a disruptive team, but in some ways looking for people that don't meet what your criteria are and outside your comfort zone can often bring the best ways to challenge and push a team to a different level.
That's an interesting kind of thought because I feel like it's sometimes as coaches, or it could be probably in any industry, is like we get in these silos, especially with our modern world and technology. We just see what we want to see. And I know that you're talking about right now the importance of just diverse ideas on a team. Now, can you talk about the importance of a team kind of rowing together, having like a North Star or, a certain goal while and making sure that they're aligned in their philosophy while embracing this diverse thoughts?
Yeah. So the key to having everybody thinking differently and behaving differently is that they have something that they are all rowing in the same direction to achieve. So that common purpose, that common language that they can use is really important. So I think that for most teams, when I'm looking at innovation in a company, we're looking at how do you really get clear on what is the customer experience and what are you there to serve, so what value do you provide. And so they did a lot of research on what motivates people, and it was surprising research because it showed that the most motivating thing for employees is that they could make progress on a meaningful goal. And progress would be that they have autonomy and the ability to get traction without being micromanaged, with being hindered by other factors in an organization or just, on their team. But the meaningful goal part was that they could see that their efforts were moving them towards something of value. And so when you think about that, then no matter how diverse the thinking is and how differently people approach a challenge or a problem or their speed of learning, they're always anchored in that commonality, which keeps them together, helping each other, understanding each other to get to that end point.
Absolutely. And so I'm imagining for coaches that are listening and the parents as well, that customer experience is the athlete, right? What is the athlete experiencing? And I have noticed the best results I've seen for athletes that are part of my program or I've coached have felt fallen in love with the process of, oh wow, I'm like tangibly getting better.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes the mistakes that companies make, as well as I've seen with teams, is that they're using a measurement that puts the team against each other versus towards that
Mm,
common goal. So, I'll use whenever you have like sales teams, for example, and it's if you get a sale, I lose a sale. So there's that competition within the team instead of working together towards an end goal. And I find that my daughter plays volleyball. I find that in volleyball a lot, where it's like you get pluses and minuses for plays, and the more pluses you get, the more play time you get. Well, it drives them to then be the person who gets the plus to get the time on the court. But what it's not doing is actually elevating the team to beat the team opposite them, where, measuring what that team you want to be like is a great way to say, then how are we as a team comparing to that team versus trying to fight amongst themselves.
absolutely. Let's talk high performing teams right now. What do you feel like the like two or three most important, we'll say, ingredients are in building a high performing team?
So we have two of them, I think, already, which is that they have to have a common purpose and that they have to be measured according to what you want to achieve. I have a saying that says, "Show me how a person is measured, and I'll tell you how they behave." So how you measure them individually and as a team. And I would say the third one is communication. So how do you actually communicate expectations and build towards those measurements without individuals being either harsh on themselves or competitive with their teammates or getting really discouraged and giving up?
Absolutely. So before we dive into the communication aspect, I actually want to kind of build on the measurements piece. And I want to make sure we don't kind of gloss over it because I feel like this is one of the most important aspects, right? Like especially the athletes now, like I'm coaching high school athletes, they're on social media. They see the best players in the world, whether that's in high school or that's in the NBA or the, the highest level of volleyball. I'm guessing that's the Olympics. So they're always comparing themselves to those people. And so a lot of times, like as coaches, we have to set our team standards of like what we're measuring. So for me yesterday in our team meeting, I have this one athlete who's a great defender. His offense is okay, but I used him as like a spotlight because I want us collectively to play defense. I recognized him and I was like, if you all want more playtime, maybe he's not scoring the most. However, he provides the most value with his defense. And I kind of gave him as an opportunity, like, you all can get that playtime if you play that type of defense, right? That's the expectation. That's what coach is measuring me because what gets celebrated gets repeated. That's one of the things that I've been trying to say. Can you kind of continue to expand on it and give examples of how that measurement is what creates like a great team culture?
Yeah, Absolutely. The saying I always use is what you focus on grows. So,
Yeah.
and it tends to be the highlight reels tend to be the scoring moment. And I think in business and in any sport, the scoring moment only happens because of a sequence of events that happened before that, right? So, it happens in all of the time. The sale gets made, but nobody's looking at, well, what was the product team that created the best product and the marketing team that created the best way to do that, or the operations and technology team that gave you the support that you needed to go out and have the information you needed to make the sale, right? So when we think about that in sports, we think about, and in volleyball, it's whoever gets that attack, who gets the kill, right? Or aces the serve. But what they're not looking at is the fact that, especially there, like the defense, you don't give the other team a point, right? Like
Right.
you're preventing a point and you're setting up a play. But everybody that's a parent and even the coaches, when they start cheering at the attack when the point is made, then you start getting kids that don't want to be in defense. You get kids that don't want, they're all vying for that spotlight of the block or the whatever it is. And so I think that as leaders, as well as coaches, what you do is you really focus on the process. So you're looking at what process gets us to this outcome that we want, winning the game or whatever goals you set as a team, working on X aspect or keeping the score to, a minimum. Same within business. And then you have an ability to say, okay, we didn't get the outcome we wanted. Let's blame the process, not the people. Where is it breaking down on our team? So you're not vying for that last moment of glory. You're constantly looking at what is it on all the mixture of things that lead to the positive outcome. And if we look at it from a process and a series of events, then we have a better chance to not blame teammates and to look at it from a very objective perspective.
I like that a lot. Could you continue to expand on how we could really focus as leaders on building that process? Because I feel like it is so much easier to just blame the person. Oh, you missed that shot, or you got scored on, or whatever it is. But what's that process to getting that successful result?
Yeah. So I think you have to balance it, right? Because
Right.
you wanna
Have
say, here's your
accountability.
highlight reel. And you see the highlight reels all the time, right? That's what you're talking about, social media. No one's posting their failure reel. So I think sometimes it's great to actually create a failure reel of high level athletes to go back and record a game and go out and don't do what ESPN does, go and get all of their failure reel and say, look, these Olympic athletes make mistakes. These professional athletes make mistakes too. Then when you're starting to look at what their own as a team, when they start looking at that, you can ask them questions. So what do you think happened here? What was going on at this moment? And what you often find is that half of it's mental and half of it's a physical thing. And so there's two different aspects that you have to approach, right? How do you then say, if this is the process, like I'll give a volleyball example again, but I tried to ask my daughter, like, what's the difference between, a good pass when you're on defense and it not being good? Like, is it not dropping, not good? And she'll say, don't drop the ball. That's the basic, like base level, because I can't give them a point, but I have to set it. I have to get it to my setter to set us up for getting a point, right? And it's like, oh, well, then what does that look like? And where could this be different? And how can that be different? And she starts explaining it in a way where she knows what percentage she should get that's good. Right. So she says, I can't get all of them because, if I'm jumping over a bench and hitting a wall and getting the ball in, that's sufficient. But if it's a normal serve receive, I should be able to get it to the setter. It's X% of the time. Interesting. Okay. Right. So now you're engaging with the athletes to say, as they're kind of explaining to you what the physical aspects might be, you can start looking at how do you start running drills or changing the way, skill sets. But on the other half that's mental, that's a completely different thing. And so then you have to start looking at, well, how do you use visualization? Are we, is the team, as we go into some of these, we played all day and then it was the championship game and we just couldn't do it. We just didn't, we fell apart. Is it the pressure? Is it the stress? Are we amped up? Do we need to use things like mindfulness, meditation? Do we need to do breathing exercises? Whatever it might be. And we have this in in business all of the time. The team will get to a presentation and they forget their story because executives walk in the room. You've got, everybody's so excited about an idea, and then someone goes in and says, no, nobody will like it. No one's done it before. We can't do it. And they talk themselves completely out of it. And so that's the part where I think, if you go back and you look at the process and you're looking at what's working and you're looking at what's not, and you start engaging and asking those questions, you'll split out which pieces are skills and which pieces are mental blocks to overcome as a team. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes 100% sense. And I want to get into the mental side here in a second. But before we get into that, you're kind of talking about and kind of layered into that third point. So we talked about, high performing teams have a common purpose, right? We're talking about the measurables right now. Now you're talking about communicating the measurables. And I like how you're asking your daughter, and I try and do this as a coach too, is ask the team, right, what they saw. Like how can we empower our employees or players into communicating what the standards are? Can you kind of continue to dive in and talk about how high performing teams really communicate those expectations, those standards, those agreements?
Yeah, so I think a lot of time, as everybody goes into a conversation or a situation, you come in with your own level of experience and your own perspective, right? And so whether it's an executive team or a customer service team or a sports team, I think it's really important to come in and meet them where they're at. You don't know where their mindset is. You have no idea what they think is good or bad or what they've set as a goal or an expectation on themselves. So I think that the first thing to do is sort of clear your mind and come in and meet them where they're at. Start asking questions that get to the point where they can explain how they see the situation, how they saw how it went, how they saw, how they're feeling in the moment. One thing I've learned, especially with more spirited design teams, I'll call them, is that as long as the emotion's really high, there's no learning. And as long as there's no learning, there's no change, right? So, we say change occurs at the pace of learning, and learning is something that people need to be open to. That would be the first thing I would say. Is to really try to clear your perspective, clear your expectations, and find out where they're at in the exact moment.
100%. Yeah, meeting athletes or employees wherever they are at. And that's, I feel like a baseline to just relationship building, which is like a necessary quality for any coach, supervisor, etc. And as I kind of hear you talking about like learning, I feel like that's something that's really kind of an interesting point and almost can get skipped over. And that was like one of my biggest realizations when I first started coaching basketball in general is, well, I need to teach the game. I can't just say, hey, cut to the basket. I have to show them how to cut to the basket. And like that was like my biggest aha moment. And I really have it like honestly every month. Like I'll assume, and I'm like, I really haven't done a great job teaching this. So can you talk about how great leaders, whether and a lot of times in the executive room, communicate and then they have to show their employees or whoever what the standard is?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's two parts to it, right? There's a base level of skill that everyone needs to have. So when you're talking about, I'll give an example that because it's common right now in all the leadership literature, which is, have empathy, lead with empathy, lead with empathy, lead with empathy. What does it mean, right? Like, I
Yes.
am empathetic, but
Right.
really, in order for it to be part of a culture and get embodied into the company, you need to, being empathetic has to be a feeling into action. So, what does empathy actually look like? How does that show up? What questions do we ask? How do we take care of each other? How do we show that we understand, not just say we understand a situation? So, I think that, there's that demonstration of it. I think also it's really important because everybody thinks and learns a specific way, not to assume that the way that you learn is the right way. And so I find sometimes executives feel, well, I told you and I showed you how to do it, but the
Right.
person didn't connect. They think very differently, say they're very visual, right? And so I think it's really important for leaders to have at their ready a variety of ways of explaining the same thing without getting frustrated that they're explaining the same thing. They just haven't, I think learning or teaching only comes when the person understands. So you might have to do it multiple times in multiple ways to be able to get that person to see what you're seeing. I think some of the biggest frustrations, like try something different, do something else. Well, that didn't work. Try something different. And so even with that, I'd say, okay, then teach them problem solving. Teach them what it means to try something different. If you can't teach them a specific how to, then teach them how to experiment, how to try different things, how to do that. Because I find, I think, especially with younger, even in like employees and younger athletes, it's just frustrating. Like they actually don't know what it means to experiment and try something different. Like you have to lay it out. If this is what's not working, how would we go find the resources to try something different? What could we do? We could watch someone do it. That's okay. Yeah, whatever that looks like. They actually don't even have the skills sometimes to go through what it would be like to problem solve their own issue.
100%. And we're talking about just like teaching problem solvers. And one of the things we were talking about before we got on is this evolution of the way leadership and the way we coach. Coaches now, I'm going to use coaches just because that's the industry we're in, but just in the boardroom. And you're kind of talking about how now a lot of, you're connecting with a lot of youth sports teams. However, a lot of coaches in the modern day coach like they were coached, or however, they have these experiences like, if I got through it, you can too. And I've heard it so many times.
Yeah.
Like, don't even get me started. However, I wanna
Turned out
kind
just
of,
fine.
yeah, exactly. I want to give you the opportunity to kind of talk about how things have changed. Leadership, coaching has changed in the boardroom, and how and why that needs to change in the youth sports sector.
Yeah, I'm going to start from like just even a broader perspective too on that, which is most of these young athletes are going to go into the business world. They're not necessarily
Correct.
going to go into professional sports, right?
Absolutely not.
So the time to teach them these skills are now, because they are learning so much about time management and discipline. They're learning about emotions and communication, their resiliency, grit. They can learn that in a way that says win at all costs and I'll come in and I'm going to win. Or they can learn that in a way that's really going to serve them in life in that business environment, which is, am I collaborative? Am I a team player? Do I give and receive feedback in a healthy way? Do I, brush off mistakes and focus on growth? Right. So I, think that if you look at some of the behaviors of the coaches, some of the parents, and some of the athletes, and you put them in a professional setting, they'd be certainly spoken with, oftentimes fired for the same behavior, because there's like yelling and bullying or name calling or, interfering and coming in and demanding certain things that are outside of their scope, right? Some parents do that, I've seen. We're teaching these young athletes that that's how it works. And this is where their most formative years about relationships and how they want to win. And what does it mean to win? And what does it mean to succeed? So I really think that this is the time to shift and say, you know, coaches are doing maybe winning games, but they're doing a very big disservice to these young people that are going to then come and have to be almost unlearn things in order to work in an environment that is not going to be tolerant to some of these behaviors.
1,000%. We have to be collaborative. And that doesn't mean you can't be competitive, because I'm ultra competitive. Like, I'm super competitive. And at the same time, I know that my biggest purpose in coaching JV basketball and having like club basketball programs is like, no one cares if you win a tournament like that was, in JV, like it's great, right? But in the like grand scheme of things, did you learn how to become a better teammate? Did you learn how to be disciplined and like have your own self motivation and your own self efficacy and like want to actually become a better basketball player in person? Like those are the skills we can really teach athletes.
And I think one of the things that coaches underestimate is how much their words become the internal tracks of the athletes.
Mm,
So I think, when you look at the parenting books and they say, watch what you say and how you say it, because your criticism becomes their inner critic. I think that especially when you hit kind of tween teens, I think actually the coaches, the teachers all start overtaking that part of what goes on in a kid's mind. And I think it starts becoming, like, you're too this, you're too slow, you're never going to learn, you never listen, how can you not get this is so basic, you used to be able to do this, why, I told you 1,000 times, what aren't you getting about it? Then I see when I'm in a corporate environment and I'm working with coaching adults, it's that those are the words, like they come back out and they are there. I can't do this. Why, I'm not sure why I can't understand it. I've never been good at any of these things. So I think that that is another component where, I mean, it's such a beautiful thing to be a coach of young athletes. It is a beautiful thing to be a coach of adults, but adults are fully formed and they walk away and they've got all of their stuff from their history. And if they change, they change. If they don't, you're actually forming those adults of the future. Those words and how you say them. It's not that they should never hear feedback. My daughter always asks for feedback. I need some feedback. How did that go? This felt like this. How can I get better? Like, she wants it, but the way that you deliver it is just as important as what feedback you give.
absolutely. No, I don't know what the percentage is, and you might be able to fill this in more than I can, but like body language and tone, like communicate more the message than even the message itself a lot of times. And so, and we've been, and I've done it as a coach before. I'm not perfect in by any means. One of the things I do try and do if I do yell at an athlete or, have a moment where I definitely don't want to, doesn't necessarily align with how I want to coach. I do want to have a conversation with that athlete after. Like I'll, use one example. Like I have this one athlete who loves to play offense, wasn't playing defense, wasn't really having a good game and was frustrated. I subbed him out and, he kind of like put his hands up and I was like, what value do you think you're bringing to the team? Right. Like not something that is, he loved to hear. And then after the game, I told them, I'm like, if you have this expectation to play varsity basketball, I have to hold you to a high standard. And so just making sure that he knows why I communicated that with him, like why I was frustrated with him, like I'm on your team, like I want you to succeed. And if you want to play at a higher level, you can't do this. This is unacceptable. So like my love, I do have to show people through that discipline like that.
Yeah. I mean, if you ask my daughter, one of her favorite coaches, she'd say, he screams and yells when he's happy. He delivers feedback when we need it in a very calm, relaxed, supportive tone. And you sometimes see the reverse, right? Like, what are you doing? Why can't you get this right? Wow, that was really great. Good shot, And it's like,
Right, right, right.
like flip it and say, okay, because then their whole body will relax. You'll see them relax. And then when they relax, they can absorb it differently, right? Yeah. And I think part of it too is teaching them how to give feedback. I
Yep,
see it all the time that they look towards the coach to give feedback. But you got to learn how to give feedback to your teammates in
yep,
a way that's
yep.
respectful. And you need to be able to communicate real time, because the coach can only do something, or the leader can only do something when they're in the meeting, they're helping, but real time decisions are constantly happening. And the team needs to learn how to be able to not take it as a critique, to be able to take it as a real time, and sometimes that's shorter because I don't know, like, especially in sports, you've got seconds to make a
Right.
decision sometimes. So, if they just yell, this is what I need, they're not being rude. You have to teach them too that, sometimes communication changes based on the situation you're in, which I think is really important. Like, in business all the time. If it's urgent, there's something I worked with in a healthcare environment. You're not going to speak the same way in a surgery that you would if you have all the time in the world and it doesn't matter, right? You might be a bit more abrupt. You might not say it with, pardon me, but I feel like maybe you should
Right,
do
right,
this
right.
differently. So I think that's something I see that athletes can't do. And what they end up doing is they complain to their parents. You know, I saw this recently where it's like, I didn't get to play very much because, and I didn't hit and I didn't get any opportunities to score because I wasn't being set properly. The setter doesn't
Mhm.
know what they're doing. I don't know why the setter can't
Yes.
set properly. That's why I wasn't getting points. Well, that's terrible. Then the parent goes in and says, hey, how come the setter's not setting my kid? What's going on? Why is my kid not getting any good sets? What's happening? And then the coach is like, I I'm not having this conversation. I will have it at the with the team. But the thing is it's escalated all the way back around. And really what the middle should say is, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? When you set it this way, I can't get it. If you set over me, it goes to the left side. Can we practice those quick sets that come to the middle and then talk about it? Like, I like it closer to the net. I like it further back. They don't do that. They create this whole spiral and then it becomes this constant complaint. And it's fascinating when you kind of listen to all the little side conversations of athletes with their parents and you wonder, why aren't they talking to each other? Like,
Thousand
that's the only
percent.
place it's going to change. The parents aren't playing. And my daughter comes to me and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So go talk to whoever you need to speak to about that because I'm here to, drive, feed you, pay, and cheer. So but a lot of parents don't do that. And I think that's not just a coach thing to teach them, but I think also a parent thing is the best way to support them, especially then when they get into a business world and they're on a team. You don't want them going around complaining to everybody else. You want them addressing their team directly. You want them working through the issues. You want them to be able to have effectively, lead their team if they have a team. And that's something we're just teaching a really bad habit. Let me tell you, it's hard to break later on in the business world. So that's one thing I wish would definitely change as well.
Yeah, 1000%. I mean, I always tell them that. I'm always like, if you want more playtime, you got to come ask me. Because when you are in the business world or working world, whatever it is, and you want a raise, guess what? Mommy or daddy cannot ask for a raise for you. And so I actually had this one kid come up to me the other day, and I loved his approach. He's like, Coach, how can I bring more value to the team? Like, instead of being like, how can I get more playtime, right? He knows, like, I've been talking about like value. He's like, he knows that value equals playtime, right? And so he just like I thought that was such a good question. Instead of his parents asking me about playtime, because his minutes were getting cut, and like he was honest, and actually he played really well on Saturday. And so it's kind of amazing how like just a simple shift like that, and so really encouraging parents to like have their kids figure it out. And that's one thing I am with the kids too is like teaching them how to solve their own problems on the court, like you're talking about. Like I'm not playing the game, right? I burned through all my timeouts last time. Like there was only so much I could do. I tried to coach you as much as I could, but at the end of the day, you make the baskets, you make the passes. Like I can do my best to prepare you, but I've been trying to like get them to huddle with each other, create like a lot more opportunities. Like I have to remind them over and over to communicate. Hopefully one day they'll just communicate without me reminding them, and that's kind of just the process of leading.
Yeah, and you can practice that. Like I think sometimes when I see them practice it in practice, because practice is where you're practicing skills. But what if you practice communicating to each other really quickly, real time, as if it was a game, right? And this is another thing that I try to focus on with my daughter, and she's gone through periods where she hasn't had a lot of playtime. She's gone through periods where I think she's so exhausted. We have to work on stamina for her to play all the way through. Sometimes the best thing for you to do is to not play. I don't know where minutes become the best thing, right? Like if you're truly looking at the other team and you say, I don't know, but volleyball, they watch video of the other team. They learn what their strengths are. They learn what their weaknesses are. If you're not the best player to get put on the team that game, You're not the best. Your best job is to smile and cheer and be the best person on the bench because your skills aren't the best to offset that particular team, right? And if you've got a good diverse team, you will have certain players you can move into different places. It is no different than in a business environment. You don't always put the same people in. Think about like, again, healthcare, like surgeons. I don't want a cardiac surgeon working on my brain, right? Like sometimes the game calls for something different. And I think that's something that, trying to teach them that sitting and cheering is not the worst thing. Sometimes strategically, you're not the best player to get beyond the court at that time, right?
I like that a lot because, like, I'm thinking specifically for my team and where we're at now. I have like three players who, no matter what, will be on the court, and everyone else kind of rotates. Well, not everyone else, but I have like, say 4 to 6 guys that'll rotate those final two spots based on what we need, who we're playing. Are we playing a team with size? Are we playing a shorter team that's quicker? And it's hard. And I actually had an old mentor talk to me about it, or I actually heard him kind of addressing a disgruntled player, and he's like, as players, a lot of times you'll look at it, you're like, you'll go look and see one on one, you might be better than that player. Well, we're playing a 5-on-5 basketball game. It's a team game. Coaches make decisions based on, exactly what you're talking about, and it's not necessarily means like Jimmy is better than Timmy. It just means Jimmy is better than Timmy, or Jimmy can bring more value to the team than Timmy on the court, and Timmy should be cheering. I might be confusing myself with the
No,
Emmys, but you know,
it's if it was just your skill and your skill was as consistent as it could possibly be all of the time, and you played the same exact players all of the time, then you're always going to be the choice, right? But it's so dependent on even how you play so well with this person, but that person's having an off day. They're not feeling great. They brought low energy, and bringing in two different people that work better and have that chemistry against this other team. I don't think we do a great job. And I don't think we do a great job in business either, describing why the strategy behind making some of these choices. And what it does is we hear it as, I have less value, I'm not as valuable, versus saying, no, everybody has value. You are all high value right now, given the situation that's ahead of us and how we are today in this moment with our mindset and our physical capability and whatever it is. This is what we're going to do. Right. And it's like, it happens a lot, even in business, right? Like, you're about to go up into a presentation. The person says, my kid was sick and I was up all night and I'm totally exhausted. I can't remember anything. I'm so disheveled. You pull that person out and you put in
right,
somebody else. You do that in
right,
plays when people are acting. They have understudies, right? Like
yeah,
you have stunt doubles. Like there's so many times where people step in for
true,
the quote unquote superstar
starter,
and
yeah,
they're not it's not bothersome. It's understanding that there's a bigger goal than just, your worth being wrapped up on, are you playing the most? Are you getting the most, attention at work? Did all of the call outs go to you? Right. Like, that's sort of, that's where when people say, here's a great sign of team and leadership is when someone says, actually, my team is the one that deserves this. They're the ones that, prepared me the best and did this and did that. I see that very rarely in youth sports. Like I had a great, kill because my setter set the perfect set because the defender gave the perfect pass. Nobody says that, right? And so as coaches and as leaders, if we start really putting that focus and calling out great pass, amazing
yep,
set,
yep.
and then the hit goes and you're like, don't say anything. You just go, yay, right? Of course you should hit that. That's your job. And it was a perfect pass and a perfect set. If you didn't hit that, why are you playing, kind of thing, right? So it's like, I think that's where we do, like, you kind of put more focus on the process, and it's not that you dampen the moment you get the basket. Like, I know that feeling. You hear that swish sound. It's like, oh, it's amazing. But if you don't celebrate all along the way, then everyone's going to just want that moment because that's what they're going to crave.
I call it thank the passer, right? Like I literally will have them point to the passer and thank them. Like if I'm doing some drills, I don't do it all the time, But if they don't do that, then I kick that team off because that's a part of the culture that we want to build and reinforce that, like, okay, recognize the passer. And then if you build that recognition in, right, then they're like, oh, I want to make good passes,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I'm getting recognized.
It feels good. And what's my value? I just added huge value to this team, right? I did something that's amazing. And wait, guess what? I'm on the bench. Like I go to as many games as I can go to. And her teammates will come up to me and be like, I love the energy you bring. Because the value I bring is the energy. They get all, they're down. I bring energy and they start feeling it and they start believing in themselves, right? You bring negative energy and the parent, they look up and everyone's scowling. And my daughter says it's hilarious sometimes when I really mess up and you smile and I go, because I'm changing the energy, right? Like, and then you laugh at me because you think it's silly and then you get kind of back and you relax and you let it go. The times where you see people who get stuck on the mistake they made last, they not only lose the next point, they lose the one after that, right? And then it's momentum and it spirals. So, even just saying to them, being on the bench and you're like mad you got pulled off, and then that mad energy is there, and then you're kind of sulking, and then you're not really. Your value when you're on the bench is you bring all the energy they need. You bring all of that optimism. You start helping them see points and stuff that they can't see because when you're in the game, you can't see the game, right? So being on the bench is a great place for you to start being able to see what they can't see and help them adjust while they're playing. But that's sort of where that's like it's showing everybody that their role is very fluid on a team and that there's value no matter what position and what point you're at within that game.
1,000%. No, 1,000%. And that's the beauty of being on a team, right? Or not playing golf or like and no disrespect to golf or tennis or
It's
any of the
hard.
single sports, right? That's a different probably podcast and conversation. But when we're talking about team and leadership, right? Like I actually try and note well because I sat the bench my senior year, so for at least for basketball, so I understand that. So I always give love to. I have two kids in specifics who really don't play that much, but I always try and sneak them in just for a few minutes, just because to show you like I appreciate you, like you bring great energy regardless of how we're doing, just to show that appreciation, and that you don't have to score 30 points for me to like love you and think you bring value to the team.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, there is this technique. Rebecca Smith, actually, she wrote a book for parents on how to help athletes. And it's a great book. And she talked about it with like also like a confidence ladder, which I loved. And I stole that and I'm using it with my daughter. So if she's not performing very well at a skill and putting her in to do the skill over and over and over again is probably just going to frustrate her and have the opposite effect, right? So if they never play and they go in and they screw up, then they're going to be like, oh, I am a screw up. That's why I never play. So she talks about it like in practice to say, if this skill, she's gymnastics, so it's a little bit different, but not entirely. If this skill that you're trying to perform, where do you think you're at? Like, what's the basic amount you could do this at a level, right now? And they'll tell you. And then you say, okay, how confident if I asked you to do it right now, are you that you can do it? If they say 7, let them do it. If they say less than 7, there's a different problem you have to solve first. Because unless they can perform at a 7, putting them in a high pressure place to try to perform it will only do more harm than good. And I see this a lot where people get promoted in work and they're given all of this stuff to do and they end up doing it terribly. It is the absolute worst thing. It actually creates worse habit. It creates lack of confidence. Everything you thought you were giving them with the promotion, you just took away in a heartbeat. And so that's one of the things, and I've started asking Olivia, are you at a level 7 with that? No, why not? And I'll give this example. She said, when they serve to the baseline, being able to get there and pass. And I said, is there a place that you can do this? And she said, yeah, when I'm with Josh and Tori, these two coaches she works, not part of her team. And I said, okay, well, what makes that different? And she said, I'm having fun. And I said, okay. And I said, so when you're in practice, she goes, I'm not having that same fun. There's like a lot on me in practice because we're getting ready for a game. When I'm in a game, I really feel the pressure. I'm not having fun.
Right.
I have to do it. Well, that's the issue, right? So that mental component of when it's just for fun, I can do it. And when it's not and the pressure's on, she doesn't need more help with the skill. She's got the skill. She's capable of doing it. But that's a mental component that until that's addressed, she's always going to have a challenge with that in a game.
You have to be prepared for that moment. And that's not just skill wise, that's mentally as well. And so I feel like I'm really glad you got to get that piece of wisdom in as we kind of reach our last set, our last match. I'm not entirely sure what it is in the volleyball world of the podcast. And I feel like what would be your kind of final parting wisdom be for the coaches and leaders that are leading our athletes to help prepare them to be successful for life beyond the game?
Would say that if they can remember that they went into this to have fun and for the love of the game, and that, there are some that will go out there and they will be Olympic athletes and they will do this professionally. But for most people, what this is an opportunity, a beautiful, wonderful, fun opportunity to learn and grow as a person that prepares them to be the best leader in whatever way that is, as a parent, as a leader in an organization, an entrepreneur in life. And so if we kind of take that expectation that everyone's in it for professional athlete status, just to then take a step back and say, what is it when I'm in these formative years of their lives can I do to impart the most, what can I do to impart the most value upon them?
I love that. That's a brilliant question we can ask ourselves before every practice, every game, just to give us that perspective and reminder of what we're really here for as coaches. So where can those that are listening find and connect and learn more about your work?
So right now online, I'm on LinkedIn and I can provide the link to that. It's Laurie Clarke on LinkedIn.
I'll put that in the show notes. Perfect. Thank you so much for your time today, Lori, and all the wisdom. I got 2 pages of notes. I got a game today that I'm excited to start implementing some of the things we talked about. So I really appreciate your time.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Beyond the Scoreboard podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and share it with a friend, coach, or parent you feel like would get value from this episode. It's our responsibility to impact as many parents and coaches who are the ones that are impacting our athletes. That's how we create a ripple effect. So thank you for being a part of our community, and we look forward to serving you all next week.